Mic check 1, 2. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? If you can tell what accent I'm doing, it's working. But anyway, it's been a little longer than usual. I think I said that last time. This is terrible, isn't it? Like, it's definitely been longer this time. Around about, I mean, it's now what, 3rd, 4th of July. I think it was the 18th of March when this COVID thing was really taking hold here, and we made the decision to basically tell all the guys to stay at home. Now, myself and my brother, who owned the company, carried on coming in, working different days, so we weren't both here together to just keep things moving. And to be honest, it's what we love doing anyway, so we wouldn't really have it any other way. And then this week just gone is literally the first time we've had the whole team back in. We brought half of the team back in 6 weeks ago, and then Wednesday this week, the 1st of July, the rest of the guys started back. So yeah, it's been great to have all the team back again. But consequently, because we haven't had any people here for the last basically 3 months, we've been able to capture very little on video. But quite a lot has changed. We've managed to make reasonable progress between myself and Nat, and then obviously since having the rest of the guys back 6 weeks ago. So I'm going to show you some of that progress. First thing, quite memorable from our last workshop walkthrough, which was probably just about the time of the lockdown starting. I was watching it back earlier, and this was just a bare shell over there. Now, this is actually what I've been spending almost all of my time on during this period. The day before, I think the Friday of the day, we then told the guys to stay at home on the Sunday. On the Friday, we got the engine and gearbox and subframe in this for the first time. And I've just been working away on this the whole time. So I'll go into this perhaps more detail on a video specifically about this car. But basically, it's a Mercedes W111 Coupe. The owner wanted it to be sort of classic looking, but more modern in terms of its drivetrain, have a reasonable amount of power, good level of refinement, some nice modern features on it, and he wanted adjustable ride height so he could run it sort of high for speed bumps and uneven roads and all the rest of it, but still kind of run it low just for that coolness factor. So we've basically rebuilt the whole car, the whole underside of the shell. It's running Jaguar X300 subframes front and back, which we've then converted to air. The air management is Airlift Performance. We've done a cool detail, which I'll probably have to show you another time, on the dash, where we've actually machined a billet brass surround that the airlift controller goes into, which is being chromed at the minute. And that's actually something we've extended through this car a lot, because all of these original chrome mouldings, they're all solid brass on these cars. It's amazing, really. And that means they chrome beautifully. So we've continued that with a lot of the details on the interior. We've actually machined billet parts from brass and then chromed them. I can't show you much of that now because most of it's not in the car, but we'll come back and revisit that another time. Crate Chevy LS3, running the GM auto box, all just the standard GM management on it, just for ease. It's just a cruiser. It doesn't need to be anything special in terms of performance, because quite honestly 430 horsepower in one of these is more than enough anyway, just for cruising around and looking cool. Modern audio system, modern nav system, decent aircon, lots of kind of bespoke interior touches on it. Yeah, just a really cool thing, and a beautiful looking car as standard. So we haven't really changed anything on the outside. I think one of the only details really on the outside is what used to be side marker lights here. We've changed those around and made them basically we're still using the light body, but we've put a grille on them. They're obviously not on at the moment, but it's an air intake now. So this one's air intake for the actual air induction. That one's for the transmission cooler. And the wheels, we've had some billet wheels made for it, which are just being shipped at the moment. They're basically an 18-inch split rim version of the Mercedes Mexican hat or Baroque, whichever way you want to call it. It's like a classic Mercedes wheel from the 60s and 70s. We've had that redone not only as 18-inch, but also because we're running Jag axles, it's obviously Jag PCD, which is the same as Chevy. So they should be here this week, so I'm super excited to see them because everybody knows the wheels make the car, and it certainly doesn't look particularly great on these Jag wheels, so that's exciting. This, I imagine most of you will recognise this. Pleased to report that Gordon has finally now driven it. Only, I think, about a month ago for the first time. But we got a feedback from him. I've actually got a letter. He sent me a letter through basically with feedback on the car. But the gist was he liked it. You know, he said car drives very well. Handling feels good, although he hadn't explored the limits of it yet. Loved the engine, loved the gearbox, loved the feel of the controls. Criticisms were fairly minor. I mean, I warned him when we dropped it off that we weren't too happy with the diff noise. It's got quite a whiny diff in it, and we weren't sure whether that the diff was whining a lot or just whether that noise was being transmitted into the car a lot more. But it was one of those things, we needed to get the car to him for Christmas, and we knew there were going to be things that he had fault to pick with that we would want rectifying later. So I just gave him a heads up that the diff's a bit noisy, but drive it, see what you think of the rest of it, and we'll have it back with any tweaks you want to do. And actually, there weren't that many. He said there's a bit of a shunt in the drivetrain, and by that we mean when you kind of come on and off the throttle, you can feel something with a bit of play in the drivetrain kind of just chatter back and forth. And after kind of going through everything again with a fine-tooth comb, we spotted that the inner end of the drive shafts, the splines, are just slightly under tolerance. So there's a slight bit of play between the splines of the drive shaft and the inner CV joint. So we've sent them back at the moment to have a new pair of drive shafts made. They were custom-made shafts, so we're having another set made to a slightly different tolerance on the inner end, which will hopefully sort that. We rebuilt the diff. It had an aftermarket crown wheel and pinion. The diff we basically bought as a complete assembled unit. Now, the quality of that aftermarket crown wheel and pinion we weren't happy with, so we've put an original Ford one in and rebuilt the diff ourselves, which has improved that level of whine. And the other thing probably that sticks in my head, which we weren't entirely surprised by, but it was funny to see it written on paper, was just he put, "It's too quiet!" exclamation mark. So when we built the exhaust, you see, where are we? There's a join there, and a join. I'm trying to think which one it is. It's that one. It's that section there. So no, it's that one there. This section here, from there to there, we originally had this on it, which had a silencer in it. Now, when we had BTB build the exhaust, we said, can you make that a removable section and make us another section that doesn't have the silencer in so we can replace it if necessary, in case he thinks it's too quiet. And sure enough, he did. So all we've had to do is unbolt it and bolt the straight through section in. And I've test driven it since then, and I have to say it's so much more rewarding with more noise. It's funny that I bang on at people about, you know, electric cars, which definitely have their place, and I'll be honest, the fastest car I've ever been in is an electric car. But for me, the noise plays such a huge part of the experience. You know, it can genuinely make a car feel so much faster if it makes the right noise, and just make the whole experience more enjoyable. And it's so notable on this. Just that silencer, you know, made the car from feeling pretty awesome to drive to just like you wanting to thrash it everywhere just because of that extra bit of noise. So I think he's going to be very happy. We'll just get those drive shafts back in, and then that'll be shooting back down to him to use again. Hopefully it'll be 100% then. I imagine there might be one more round of revisions. And then I think, hopefully at that point, we'll be in a position to shoot that final episode that I know everybody's been looking forward to. But it's got to be when he's comfortable driving the car and he's driven it for a while and he's happy to give it some stick, basically, because that's what we all want to see. We all want to see Gordon Murray thrashing his Escort down the lanes, don't we? So, Stratos, that's not really progressed since last time. Just in the run-up to this kind of COVID thing, the owner, who lives elsewhere in the world, not UK-based, had a bit of a flap basically financially because he was concerned about what was going on and making sure his family was safe as a priority. So he asked us to pause on that, which we've done. However, we've got the green light to go ahead on it. So as of this week, we're going to be cracking back on with that. If you follow me this way, I'll stop talking non-stop to have a quick coffee. Okay. So, This is one that I don't think we even had here and probably haven't mentioned at all on YouTube yet. This is basically the most recent project we've started. It was delivered just prior to the lockdown here, and this is the one that Nat's mainly been working on whilst I've been working on that Mercedes. During the time it's only been the two of us here. It's obviously a Morris Minor. What we'll do is we'll do a more detailed video about this because there's a bit too much to fit into a couple of minutes chit chat about it. But basically it's kind of a total reimagination of a Morris Minor with driving enjoyment as a priority on it. So that's that. Obviously the Mark II Jag, Project Utah. You know we're doing a series on this, so I'll go into the work we've done on that in that episode and move on. I think you might have seen that Mustang before. That's just kind of awaiting, that's the next one we're starting. As soon as the Jag metalwork is finished, which we're about 1 or 2 days away from finishing that, we're going to make a start on that Mustang, which is more or less a case of just taking every panel off it and replacing all of them. I might have said last time that there was a bit of debate about whether to just use a new shell or not. But our concerns over the quality of those new shells and how much finessing they would need to make them acceptable meant that we decided it was probably going to be better just to have all the separate panels and build the shell so we can do that finessing as we build it. Cortina. We obviously did a little episode about this previously. This is something Nat carried on with since we last did a video. He basically pushed the metalwork right through to completion on it. And that was mainly the dry build process that we were doing, so mechanically building the whole car whilst it was still bare metal, so we could make provision for absolutely everything. And you can probably see a little bit of that under here now. So for instance, they've got masking tape in to protect the threads, but these welded bosses here are where the fuel pump and filter are going to mount. You see these lines of holes along here. They're going to have riv nut type threaded inserts put into them afterwards, and that's where the fuel line will be routed. Coming down to the front, there's all sorts of things in the engine bay. So there's holes for threaded inserts for mounting things like the fuel pressure regulator. There's holes for where the battery cable and the engine management loom will come through. There's probably going to be welded bosses in some place. Studs, these bits of tape along here, they're all covering threaded studs that have been welded on to mount where the wiring is going to be routed. So it's kind of covering all that level of detail at the bare metal stage, so that now it's painted, and when it's completely painted and we start building it, we haven't really got to do hopefully any, but certainly not very much drilling of the painted shell for that sort of thing, and we won't get to the point where we think, oh God, I wish I'd have thought of that previously. In terms of the paintwork process, those who have seen the Murray episode will be familiar with the process, but when we finish the metalwork, we move the shell through into our blasting room, sandblast the whole shell so it's all completely fresh, clean blasted metal, and then we do a thermal sprayed zinc process on the underside, which is basically a gun with a solid wire of zinc fed into it. It's got an oxygen feed, a propane feed, and a compressed air feed, and it basically has an oxypropane flame that melts and sprays molten zinc. So we basically spray the whole of the underside of the car with molten zinc. We then go ahead, do all of the seam sealing, filler work, all of the initial prep work, seal the whole car in epoxy primer, and I failed to mention we epoxy it immediately after blasting as well, so it's epoxied straight after the bare metal. Then we do all the filler work and prep work. Then we go over that with epoxy so that all of the porous materials are sealed in with epoxy primer. Then we do this, this is Raptor, it's a U-POL brand name, but it's basically a sprayed urethane coating, which we've tinted the final body colour. That gives us the underbody stone protection. We also, if you come around here, hopefully you can see inside, any interior areas that are going to be covered with carpet get Raptor as well, because it's just a nice tough coating that doesn't get rubbed away very easily by carpet or anything that's rubbing on it. Areas that are going to be an exposed painted finish, so things like the dash, you can see those structural members we're leaving bare, the cage, the bulkhead, the A-pillars, they're all going to be visible. So they've got a proper 2K build primer on them, which we've prepped. So that we'll go over that with the final paint to give a proper glossy finish on that. So we're going to do, that's probably the next step, and then we go, once everything is sealed in with a non-porous coating, we'll then wet sand this epoxy primer that's on the outside, and that will be the final stage before final paint. So that kind of slightly greenish grey colour that you see on the Raptor there is what we will be spraying on the outside as well. So yeah, really excited to see that, and we've just been going through the process of getting all the ducks in a row, if you like, for the rebuild on it. So we can hopefully do that as quick as possible, because I'm quite keen to try and get that one drivable at least for the very tail end of the summer. The owner of that is in the public transport business, so has not been in the best of frame of minds lately. So I think having a nice car for him to drive at least for the tail end of the summer will really cheer him up. This was going to be a project we were due to start basically this week. Really exciting project. It's an early Lotus Elan. We basically did a concept for a speedster version where it has doors moulded in, a little tiny aero screen, kind of aero pod behind the driver, and then we were going to do a revised suspension on it, still the original backbone type chassis, but our own suspension design, a stronger diff, and then a very powerful naturally aspirated 4-cylinder on a sequential box, basically as a track day / hill climb and sprint car that looked kind of really clean, minimal, and just an amazing looking thing, and a project we were all incredibly excited about. And then 2 days ago, the owner dropped a bit of a bombshell on me that he'd been out on a track day. He had 3 cars that he took to, 3 of his cars he took on a track day, and suddenly realised that the really light, exposed, open, powerful cars, he was starting to not feel comfortable in them on track. He was much more at home in the saloon cars he's got. So he's got an M3 GTR, kind of almost a GT spec E46 M3. He was really enjoying that and felt comfortable in that, whereas he had a BAC Mono. He's also got a Jaguar XK 150 that's kind of done for track days. And in those he was feeling a lot less comfortable, and so he said, no, it was completely fine. I mean, he said, yeah, I just don't think it's the right car. I think I'm going to just call a halt on it. And I respect that. You know, it's best to do that now rather than get further down the line and, you know, have all the money in it and then decide that it wasn't the right thing. One of the things that's probably most exciting, you know, I said it's a naturally aspirated powerful engine. More specifically, it's a Millington Dimond engine. It's also the 500th Millington Dimond engine, which we specifically negotiated for this project. Those who don't know what that is, the people who are in kind of UK club rallying will know them more. It was originally Cosworth YB based. Millington cast an alloy version of the block and did a heavily modified version of the cylinder head and ran them naturally aspirated. This is rather than the turbo version that was in the Sierra Cosworth. And they were a very successful engine, and they found their way into a lot of Mark 1 and Mark 2 Escort rally cars over here. Perhaps the worldwide audience might know Ken Block's Mark 2 Escort. That has a Millington Dimond engine in it. And they went right up to long stroke engines of 2.7 litre capacity, and then they moved on to the Series 2, which is now their own head casting as well as their own block casting. Has the throttle bodies, has roller barrel throttle bodies actually cast into the head casting, or part of the head casting. Amazing bit of kit. 2.7 litre, and that's the spec that we've had built for this, is a 2.7 litre, relatively mild cams, so it had a fair bit of low down torque. But all of these Millington engines, you're looking at well over 300 horsepower. And this is from a naturally aspirated 4-cylinder. So as you can imagine, with this, our target weight was 600 kilos. So a 600 kilo, 300, well over 300 horsepower, and with the torque to go with it being a 2.7. We're going to go with a SADEV 6-speed sequential with paddle shift. Really minimal. We were just going to run a digital dash in it. We're going to run a suite of life racing electronics on it, PDU, the engine ECU, the dash. So it was going to be absolutely ballistic. I mean, you're looking at power to weight numbers that you would compare with the most powerful supercars, but in something much lighter, so you know it'll accelerate a lot quicker. Now, what I would say, just to finish this video, is because that engine now doesn't have a home, Although the owner's paid for it and he's willing to hang on to it, he's also paid for this. There's no bad feelings there, but he was keen that maybe somebody else pick up the reins with the project, because he would like to see it done, even if it's not for him. And likewise, we were so excited about it, we'd like to see it done. So if there's anybody watching who wants a ridiculously powerful, absolutely ballistic and beautifully made speedster Lotus Elan, I'm looking at you, Jay Leno. I know you've already got one, but this one, no windscreen, just a little bit cleaner. Maybe you're too big for it. But if somebody wants something like that, you know, and has the budget to allow it, please do get in touch. Everybody's idea of budget on these things varies so much that you may be surprised the expense of it might be less than you think. So please do get in touch, because we would love to build this. And on that note, I'm going to leave it, and next time we'll give you another show around when there's more exciting stuff to see.